Coming up in the latest episode of Netball Unlocked, it's time to review the latest round of NSL action, with just one team remaining perfect after 4 rounds. We look ahead to the weekend's action and 4 more big games. We wrap up the news agenda with a little look at SSN as well. Welcome along to the latest episode of Netball Unlocked, as I've just said. And after the drama of the last couple of weeks, Chloe, we thought we were going to get a fairly quiet netball weekend, but it kind of doesn't feel like it was. Does it ever?
I mean, the action certainly delivered some drama, didn't it, Paul? It really did.
It did. And I think, firstly, before we get going, I wanted to give a shout out to the last couple of weeks, because I obviously wasn't with us for the Alicia Skulls fallout and episode. And then obviously last week we had Jess Thirlby, and a massive thank you to the Unlocked community, because we had our best week ever, which is great. That's what happens when you get a really busy news agenda. But look, I think we've all been quite vocal about, maybe where netball needs to be in sort of public conscious and in wider media. And there wasn't a huge amount done. I don't think I was particularly impressed by kind of a lot of the mainstream media coverage, but the netball podcast community sort of really stepped up. And whilst we haven't had any press conferences yet and all those sorts of things, I think there are enough people putting some good stuff out there, just sort of raising questions, talking about issues. And you and I were kind of around last year with not as many pods around, and it just feels like there is a growing groundswell of trying to give this sport its platform it deserves. So I think everybody deserves a big pat on the back who's kind of putting their effort into these, because we do it in our own time. And it felt like a really good couple of weeks. Yeah,
definitely. And I think the discourse and the dialogue could be helped, as we said, by availability and press conferences. I thought actually listening to Tamsin and Tracy on Off the Court about Jess Selby stepping down and Anna Stenbridge's appointment was really punchy, powerful perspectives you're never going to get from anybody else. Particularly, I think Tracy got really emotional. But, she was sort of saying why the way the announcement came out was odd to her. The apparent lack of backing of Anna Stenbridge as well. It should have been more thrust behind her from the governing body, and all of that sort of stuff is just readily available to listeners of Netball podcasts. And I just think that's such a gem. So props to everybody, because it was a lot of hustling, wasn't it, to get all of that stuff out.
There was a lot to listen to as well. That's an interesting point, because I agree kind of with you there. Tamsin and Tracy was clearly like those with the insight that was like a real education as you were listening to. And I was trying to think about the kind of announcement, and it's such a tricky thing to balance, right? Because obviously Jess stepped aside, continuity was really clear, it was really key to the whole process. But I don't know if it had worked if you'd have put the initial story out and then put a line out a few hours later or a week later around Anna Stenbridge. I think I kind of felt like it was going to be tricky either way. So I think all in one go was probably right, but I completely took Tracy's point.
Definitely, when I think about the statement and the wording of it, it wasn't as powerful, it wasn't as backing as it could be. And I think that's probably the bit that, having been the Anna in the situation in 2015, I think to hear Tracy sort of on that was just really, really special, for sure. But I don't know, I think I'm with her. I think, especially given the context with which Anna takes the job, given her previous history, it does really need reinforcing why she is the right person. We were literally on our emergency pod being like, is she really the right person? So that skepticism was really there. So look, it's a tricky announcement, whatever we're doing for the comms department to deal with. But I think there is, we're a week on, and there hasn't been any further information, any kind of reassurance, which I do think is a bit weird.
Yep. Well, we'll continue to push, won't we? We'll continue to do our bit.
We will.
We'll continue to ask the questions. Aside from that, before we get into Super League action, how was your own netball weekend, Chloe? Just sat glued to the TV from Friday to Sunday?
Rocking backwards and forwards, because oh God, it was a nightmare, wasn't it? Watching Sunday's games. Really, really frustrated. with the picture, the quality, the audio, even the production as a whole. I thought some of the commentary was maybe not up to the usual standard. Names being pronounced incorrectly and the like. And the Mavericks Lightning game wasn't available to watch until sort of late Monday. No apology. And I think we sort of said before we jumped on, I guess when you do crisis comms, when they teach you about crisis comms, you only apologize once, because you want to acknowledge, but you don't want to water down what an apology means by constantly apologizing. And I suppose the re-upload of a clean copy of the game is the action in response to the incident. But it's just still really irritating. It's still really irritating. It's not good enough. It puts people off the sport. I mean, I got a text from my father-in-law, is your audio weird? Mine's not working. This is affecting fans of the game, and it's putting people off watching it. And when you have SSN on, it's a reminder of what it could be, what it should look like, what investment looks like. So whoever is responsible, they will be hearing, not just us, as we're saying, our little podcast Netball army, all probably with the same opinions. But crack on with it, please, because it's just, round 4 and it's the same thing as last season.
It's not round 4 though, is it, Chloe? To be fair, no. It's 3-4 years on, and it's the same conversation. So to my end, I completely get that there's no sort of apology and no statement, because it's like, well, yes, you can, apologize on behalf of, but really the guys who've been producing this now for a few years are constantly letting the sport down. And as much as I kind of started by shouting out the netball community, who's done a really good job of kind of reviewing what's happened over the last couple of weeks, like at a very top level, like this product that you want to put out to everybody is kind of being compromised every week, and certainly not by the players on the court, and certainly not by the in-arena experiences. I think, you and I have both been to enough netball over the years to know that is getting better. There's obviously work to be done, but we all recognize the kind of resource issues that various franchises have. But definitely that in-game experience is getting better. And we know that the product we're being served by players is something we all enjoy watching. But the issue is trying to watch it. Now, whether you watch it as live, as quite often we do, or you watch it on a delayed basis, which we know a lot of people do, right? The numbers are always better afterwards, because it's a sport that is kind of watched by convenience for a lot of people who don't go and watch it in person. So to just have a serviceable broadcast shouldn't be a conversation that we're still having 4 or 5 years on. And it makes me angry sometimes, and I know a lot of people feel the same, that we're still doing the same bit. Like, we could re-record this and probably put it out again in another couple of weeks, right? That's how frustrating it is.
Yeah, definitely. And I just think, I think about Amex, right? You've just sponsored, a huge credit card brand. It's just come in to sponsor a Super Shot, and you missed a chunk of it. The second quarter of the Mavericks Lightning game, couldn't even watch it, that Super Shot period, because just, I don't know, it was like a takeover, like the aliens are taking over. I don't know. Yeah, just more to push, more to watch, irritating. And just I guess a general call to everybody, like, step up.
Yeah.
Keep stepping up, keep pushing. It's hard, it's tiring, it's frustrating, but keep stepping up, because we are all watching, and we are all waiting for it to get better.
Yeah, we'll leave it there, hopefully, for now. Before and again, like, we're going to dive into the games. I do think it's worth wrapping up the kind of news agenda. Most notably, I think over the last week or so since we last spoke, we've had injury news confirmed, and really sort of heartbreaking stuff as far as Jazz Brown and Leeds Rhinos are concerned. She's out for the season with an Achilles injury. Sasha Howard came in at the weekend. Cassie's sister stepped up from Next Gen. I don't think we've had confirmation as of time of recording as to whether that would be permanent, or whether they may do what I'm about to tell you Birmingham Panthers did, and that's pick off another Next Gen athlete from elsewhere. But we really feel for Jazz. I'll get your thoughts on that in a second. Gabby Coffey is out for the next 4 games, 3 if we count the weekend where she missed. That's because of a back injury that she's managing. and Keris Finn, who seems to be the first cab off the rank as far as defenders are concerned in the Super League. We saw it last year, and she stepped up and acquitted herself really well for Panthers this weekend. She did so as well last season, but again, like a real blow for Panthers to be without Gabby Coffey. And whilst Thunder had some really positive news with Nicola Smith and Aaliyah McCormick back in the squad, disappointment for both Jazz and Gabby at this early stage of the season, Chloe, particularly Jazz.
Yeah, I just want to talk about Jazz actually, because that is super devastating, isn't it? To have fought your way into the England Roses, the season, the international period before Commonwealth Games, kind of make yourself the first choice keeper, and then, well, I say kind of, I think she did. I think what I'm saying is that the consensus generally was that she did do that, and then to bust your Achilles in a Super League game is deeply frustrating, and because of the nature of netball, the World Cup is the year after, so I would imagine all energy focus is going to be on trying to get Jazz back and ready for that. And I just reminded of what we were talking about our season preview, and just said with all these teams, like they're really great, but a lot of them are one injury away from a season looking really different. So obviously we saw Rhinos manage without Jazz Brown and what that looked like, and then you think about Samari Visser having only just started to build a relationship with Jazz, to have to build a new relationship with potentially, like you said, a next gen athlete, if that's what Rhinos are going to bring through, and on top of Yomi. It's super tough, but I think also, if everybody, I would shout out the Raz Koshi unlock that we did, talking about injury, and we spoke to her just before she'd just done her quad, and an injury can be really tough, because we'll talk about it now, and then we won't talk about it every week, but that athlete still has to sit and go through that process every week. So definitely thoughts with her.
I think that's a really good point. I asked Elle Cardwell the same question, and she said, like, nobody thinks about what happens like after that initial burst, and she was kind of on her own in Australia when she went through that. So, yeah, again, netball community, all with Jazz, who's had a really brilliant two years or so, and forced her way into the England reckoning. We touched a little bit on England, and I suppose until we speak to someone, either Anna or the team themselves, we won't get much in the way of big picture thoughts. But yeah, now the dust settled, anything from you, Chloe? I suppose the most notable thing might be that Tamsin Greenwheat signed a long-term deal with Mavericks. If we're tying things together and drawing red string between points.
Yeah, I mean, that was quite interesting, wasn't it? Because Tamsin again confirmed on the Off the Court podcast that she hadn't been asked to Tracy straight up asked her, did anyone call you? She said no. And then the timing of this, it does make you smile, doesn't it? She's been bundled up by Mavericks and unlikely to be going anywhere, unless a breach of contract, it seems. So, I just think it's really, really one of those shocking things that I guess we'll just have to kind of wait and see how it unfolds. We also got somebody else that was questioned about the England job after the the Dragons game. I thought this was really off. I don't know. There was I appreciate the question being asked, because it is the days after a massive announcement. But of course, I'm talking about Ebony Asura-Brown asking Raina Bloxham after the Dragons win. If I think the question was phrased, "You got your first win. Will you be applying for the England job in August?" Now, that's again, like I said, actually, if there'd been press conferences after every NSL game, I'm sure every NSL coach probably would have got asked. Certainly Karen Gregg or Vic Burgess would have been asked about it. But this one was strange, because Ebony, of course, is the president of England Netball. Raina Bloxham is, of course, the director of netball at Wales. So very jarring, that one. But we can apparently, well, she didn't actually, she just sort of laughed it off. So I'm not sure if that was an answer on that one, but that did make me laugh.
Yeah.
How about you?
That is one. Yeah, no, I think difficult to kind of draw any conclusions properly at the moment. I do think where England go in the medium term is something that we can kind of debate for the next few weeks and months. I think what we need to know is the sort of immediate short term, right? Because it's the Commonwealth Games is 4 months away. England have a plan that they presumably have been working to, and that's why kind of Anna stays on, if you like. So it would be nice to find out a little bit more about that as we move forward, what the plan is for England heading into Games, and then sort of how preparation pivots. And I'd like to know a little bit more about kind of Anna and what she thinks she can bring to the table. I think that's more than fair. We and everyone has kind of questioned the decision. There's elements of it that we all understand, but also like, okay, let's find out a little bit more about that. And I think that's probably where I am with it at the moment. And I think once the Games is out of the way, how that process is going to play out for England, and how they might move forward, because as we said, like the World Cup is around the corner as well. So you're almost kind of potentially bringing someone brand new in for like a 12-month cycle, and like, is their vision going to be different to what's just gone on? So yeah, lot to take in that regard.
Actually, may I just well, obviously we're talking about Jazz and we talk about England, and then the Jazz is going to miss that, and what the implications are for the squad in the face of that. That's a big thing that we should say. But also in terms of contracting. So, what do the Roses players do with the ones on the 25-26 contract? Is this potentially new coach going to be able to pick the players? Because typically Roses contracts come out before, the international period and the like. So that's definitely something I'm sure, I imagine heads will be scratching England Netball trying to figure out what to do. Do you just extend the players that you have now to get you through to the Commonwealth Games and then recontract at a different point, or what that looks like? Because I can't imagine the scenario of a potentially a new coach coming in with players they didn't pick. I think that's really weird. I think weird a lot. Sorry, no, really strange.
I think that's fine. I think that dynamic is going to be something that will be a fascinating kind of subplot to what comes. Final thing then, SSN. Couple of notables from you, Chloe.
Yeah, we are 2 rounds into SSN and only 2 teams that are unbeaten. On the top, the Thunderbirds, 66-53. They beat Fever. And what was hilarious, Paul, was this team that people weren't too sure about how the recruitments were going to go. Or, online people were saying, can we get this team to play the Diamonds? El Murray managed to match her scoring record from the opening, her Thunderbird scoring record from the opening game. So another great day in the office for the debutante. And whether the rookie, I suppose, is the better term. And she actually started to flash her super shot ability, which we know quite well from NSL. But there was the camera cut to Tanya Obst on the bench just with this smile as El Murray put in her first SSN super shot. But quite remarkable that she hit her first 58 goals without having done that. But another big day in the office for Shamira Sterling-Humphrey. Her and Latanya Wilson combined for 10 gains, 6 interceptions and 15 deflections. If you're on international watch ahead of a Commonwealth Games, that is a great thing ticking over for Jamaica. Georgie Horgus, another one I just wanted to highlight because she's a little dynamo that the Diamonds will definitely be drawing on going forward. She had 37 goal assists from 49 feeds. She was an absolute machine in that game. Elsewhere, the Lightning beat the Firebirds 63-62 in what they call, Paul, the Battle of the Bruce. And that's the highway that separates the 2 teams in Queensland. That was quite a dramatic one because actually the Firebirds were leading for most of that and the Lightning edged it. One of the things I wanted to draw out from this game, because it was a real talking point online, was that Mary Chollock, who came from NSL, the Ugandan shooter, finished at 71% shooting. So she had 48 from 68. But then had 14 rebounds, so actually only missed 6. So 6, obviously, the Lightning gained possession from. On the other side, down the other end, Wallum had 48 from 63 with 8 rebounds. Some people out there not sure about the attacking rebound, whether that's a stat that should be celebrated. Given that netball is a possession game, I think that's a really interesting take. I just wondered what you thought on that. Because, and I should say the wider context is with Mary's, this has been going on a while. So in our opening season, the shooting wasn't so accurate. And SSN is a league where even if you are 6'7", someone will try and nab the rebound, and Ash Irvin did quite a bit. But what do you make of that? Is that something that Firebird should be worried about?
As the father of a shooter, attacking rebounds are always a pretty interesting one. I think ultimately, and I think most shooters themselves would take accountability for owning the shot to start with, right? I think they would all rather not be rebounding. But I do think it's an interesting thing, and it's actually something I've been getting my daughter to work on recently, because like that ability to follow it up. I think I saw a really good one, but I don't know if it might have been what was it over the weekend, with like a really eye-catching kind of offensive rebound, for give my basketball parlance. But yeah, I think Mary's struggles under the post have been a bit of a surprise, and the fact that she can take advantage because of her height is one thing. But I don't know. It's an interesting question, actually. I haven't really thought about it. Yeah, I'm not sure. You've asked the question. What do you think, to give me more thinking time?
Well, I suppose to draw on basketball, there's that classic stat line, isn't there, which is goals, points, assists, rebounds, and you don't differentiate in that attacking or defensive. No. When you write a basketball report and you get the double-double or the triple-double, and nobody questions whether those maybe, I don't know, the bulk of those rebounds are attacking rebounds or not. It's just something that's celebrated because it is a possession game. And I do think in this instance, off the back of this game, I think it's okay. It's okay. It's not ideal, but it's okay because she got 14 rebounds. So actually like only 6 turnovers. But and we'll talk about missed shots and how that can shape a game in this league coming up. We will, of course. So, but look, does it invite an opportunity for the other team to get involved and to turn you over? Yes, it does. So, look, I think it's not a new talking point for Mary Chollock. During one of the timeouts, Kiri Wills actually sort of spoke through the shooting motion with her, so they've clearly been talking about it and working on it. And whether it's and Mary, and for much of the game was able to present, was able to take much more ball. They are more confident feeding her. Maddie Gordon, talking of injuries, actually we should say, Maddie Gordon, the New Zealand international, is out for the foreseeable with a hamstring injury. So look, I think it is an interesting one, but I think an attacking rebound is maybe not to be celebrated, but it's not to be dismissed. It's certainly not a stat that should be put away.
Yeah, so I would come down on that side of things. I don't think it should be criticised for an attacking rebound, so long as you go away and you and the teams and the performance crews will do a far better job of this, obviously. But saying, look, this was great, but actually we can clean this bit up by sorting this out, and that obviously is a cleaner shot. I also think as well, I know Mary did a good job in this instance, but when you're chasing your own rebounds, you put yourself in a position where you can cause the contact, and I think then handing possession back is something that sort of doubles the missed shot, right? Like that's probably the challenging part of it for coaches, that you put yourself at a greater risk of giving away possession. But like I say, I think that's on the performance teams, but I think from a player point of view, if you can get the better of an offensive rebound, that's what I'm going to call them because that's just habit, then I think fair play to you. But I think it probably also speaks to something that you maybe need to clean up in some way, shape or form.
Definitely.
150 shots outside before school. That's what I do. Not me. That's what I tell her to do. My daughter, her being my daughter.
God, Kira, I hope you're okay.
Yeah, God bless her.
Yeah. Well, then we should say elsewhere, the Vixens, the defending champions, were defeated the Giants 68-52, and the Swifts, Helen Housby was MVP for England Roses watchers, just edged out the Melbourne Mavericks 70-69, and this was in a double header in the out in Sydney, and 13,400 people attended. So that's brilliant. Actually a new record. So things are ticking along quite nicely over in SSN.
And I think when you see those crowds and you see those arenas come to life, it does underline how much kind of growth there still is for us to do. Like netball, so deep into the psyche out there at the very highest level. that when you see that, it is, come on. I was at the Copper Box at the weekend. 3,000 was a really good crowd. We know we'll get some good crowds over the course of the season, but we still got a long way to go where we're kind of like doing that on a regular basis. But the double-header nature of it is interesting. We spoke a little bit about Nottingham earlier this season. We'll get another one in Liverpool and another one in Nottingham, and maybe how they grow is going to be kind of key and crucial to this league going forward. But interesting to see that. Also, Helen Housby's post-game interview, I think, given what everybody's spoken about in terms of accountability and visibility, like Helen fronting up after a pretty tough first week at the office to say, look, I'm big enough. I can take it. I can take the criticism. That's why we're out here playing professional sport. Like, not that anyone who's ever spoken to Helen would have expected anything different. But again, when we don't always get the chance to speak to players after games or coaches after the games, to sort of see Helen in her MVP interview go out there and just kind of own a bad day at the office and say, yeah, look, bring on the criticism because it'll make me do this. It'll make me do this the next time.
Yeah, you get paid to play. This is how it works. Yep, exactly. No, that was good. It was punchy and nice. So that's probably the top bits from SSN, Paul.
Very good. I do like our SSM roundup. It is good, and I am trying to up my SSM watching. So yeah, I feel like I'm getting there. Not at your level yet, Chloe.
It's only 8 games of netball every weekend. It's fine.
I know, it's intense, isn't it? Very intense. Maybe I might get you to do an SSM picky bits one week.
Wouldn't that be nice?
Shall we move on then? Shall we get stuck into the Super League weekend?
Let's do it.
How should we start this? Should we go back to front to back? Is there a game you'd like to talk about first up? I'll let you pick, Chloe.
Let's go in order.
Okay.
Let's go in order. All right.
Which means we start on Friday night. Leeds Rhinos, who came into the game 6th, up against the Dragons, who were 7th. We obviously had the news in the build-up to it that Jazz Brown was out. In the end, it's the Dragons who come away with the first win of the season, not first points of the season, because they got a bonus point defeat against London Pulse, but their first 3 points of the season, 62, 51, and good value for it, Chloe?
Yeah, it was an interesting game, wasn't it? It started off close, and then the super shot in the second quarter then allowed Dragons a bit of a break, and then they really ran away with it in that third quarter. It was 14-22. I think actually there were some good bits from Dragons. There'll be some bits that they probably won't be too pleased with. Interesting from Rhinos to see that Simone Gordon didn't start. They started with Paige Reed and Harriet Jones, and there was a lot to like in terms of how the ball was able to get in and get moved around. It kind of felt a bit more fluid than it has done for Rhinos. But I suppose the challenge really is that when you don't have that height for the super shot rebound, which they kind of got punished for. And then eventually I think Dragons' defense kind of wore Rhinos down. They're not really, I don't think Rhinos are a 60-minute team. And I mentioned it earlier, but Samari Visser was still her good self. But I think it's hard when you're the player that she is not to get sucked into everything, to try to do too many things. And Yomi Wilson now had gone from, probably on the making impact to now being a starting goalkeeper with an international that's been out in SSN. Like, that's a lot of responsibility, and you need to do your job and able to make Samari Visser look good. And I do feel for Rhinos that at round 4 they're going to have to rebuild that. And Sasha Howard did come on, because I think actually in the broadcast it looked like Samari Visser actually picked up her ankle. She looked like she got a stinger. Yeah. No news on that, but she did. They kind of put her on the bench. And we should say also, actually, Kanisa Chawani didn't come back for Dragons in this game. She was replaced by Kellen Emanuel, who did actually come on, I think because Dragons weren't actually finding the fluidity that they wanted to. But really another good game for Neve McCall, actually, Paul, I think, for this one. But what do you reckon?
Yeah, Neve McCall's really shining, isn't she? She's one of the superstars so far this season. I think she's really stepped up in a a Dragons attacking. I thought looked probably as fluid and as functional as it has all season. I think Bethan Dyke's been a real consistent force for them as well from wing attack. But I'm not sure how much more we could say about Neve McCall. She's had a really good season. Ellen Withington as well, who started at centre with Vicky Booth coming in at wing defence. So there were changes for Dragons, and obviously we're talking about what Rhinos had to deal with, but Dragons had to shuffle their pack a little bit as well. So to come out with a win, to not concede a bonus point, I think as well, because we did think there was a chance this game could be a really close one. But it's hard not to come away from the last 3 weeks really, and not feel a little bit for Rhinos. Having thought they were going to get a Jazz Brown, Sam Marie Visser, Cassie Howard kind of trio in defence. They've obviously lost Jazz. You hope this is okay, and then Cassie moved to centre to start the game. Bella Bayliss was on the bench, and Neve Kilgallen came in. So it just feels they're trying to now once again find a way. And this, I suppose, a matter of months after Joyce and Vula gave them some kind of issues to deal with at the attack end of the court. So they kind of almost knew that was going to be a tough one. And now they've got the back end of the court having to deal with all that. And I fear a little bit for them for what this season might end up being, despite some great players. And Yomi Wilson stood up really well, as you mentioned. But you do wonder how this team move forward, because after a win on the opening weekend of the season, it's now 3 defeats in a row, and they host Pulse on Friday night. We'll get into the preview in due course. But whilst they were really dogged, they were really determined, and they stayed in the first half. Right, there was nothing in it really at half time, but it felt like Dragons were just waiting for their moment to pull away, which, as you rightly point out, they did in the third quarter.
Yeah, and actually, the Rhinos with Jazz sort of had the first half with lightning until that super shot period as well. So, it is. Yeah, I think I'm with you. It is really tough. It is going to be tough for them to kind of grind through that. But in the same breath, this is a professional team, so they've got what they'll do with Jazz more permanently as a replacement will be interesting to see. Obviously, Keris Finn has been snapped up. I think that's a bit of a coup for Panthers, obviously. But yeah, it's going to be about managing expectations, looking at performance, and for Dragons, this is what they wanted. This is definitely where they wanted to be with this result. As you said, I think not to concede the bonus point is nice for them, and really now to push on, because they've had their big tests early, and here's the run where they can kind of have some fun.
Yeah, and that is the thing now. Can Dragons go away and build on victory and a win that, in some ways, they may have felt they were due after a really encouraging start to the season, and they get the chance to do that now, and build, which I don't think Dragons have ever really had the chance to do, not certainly in the last 2 or 3 years at the very least. Even though that squad is kind of grown together, it will be fascinating to see how they can potentially take that win. And the performances, actually, if you take the Thunder game out of it, they've been pretty competitive. Then how they continue to put all those building blocks together, and with Chawani to come back into the team, right? I think that's a positive thing that they went out and won without a really influential performer. So a good win, and a well-deserved win, I think, as well, as much as we can kind of fear a little bit for Rhinos, a really well-deserved win. But I think, having spoken to Lauren Palmer and having seen Rhinos go through a bit of a challenge last year, they won't shirk it, right? They'll step up every time. It's just whether they've got enough in terms of combinations and consistency to get some wins on the ball, because they need to return to winning ways sooner rather than later.
Yeah, and player of the match, Neve McCall, 22 goals at 100% and 9 super shots from 11, so at 82%. So she totaled 94% in that game. So
She's
handy,
lethal,
very
isn't
helpful.
she, this year? She is lethal.
Yeah, George Rowe, 19 from 19. She was at 100%.
Yeah, maybe they've solved that attacking conundrum.
Philippa Yarrington on 60%, no super shots attempted. I think there's still work to be done on that and the way they rotate those three, but Neve McCall's certainly ready to take the load for now.
On to Sunday, and as we've pointed out, there were 3 games back to back to back on Sunday, starting in Birmingham with the Panthers, who obviously are still chasing their first win of the season. We've mentioned Gabby Coffey not available, and that the first of 4 weeks at the moment, which she's going to be out for. Kerys Finn has signed a mid-term deal, which is not terminology I was particularly familiar with. I don't know what that means, whether that just means she signs to cover. But a mid-term deal is a mid-term deal. She's there for the next 3 weeks. And again, Kerys Finn came on and sort of did herself no harm whatsoever. Manchester Thunder, fully fit, it should be pointed out. Everybody back and everybody firing. And in the end, it was Thunder who came away with a win, 58-48. It looked at one stage that might have been an absolutely huge blowout. So credit to Panthers for an incredible third quarter, 17-7. They won that one. But Thunder, good value for the 3 points. And after losing to Pulse on the opening weekend, 3 wins on the bounce now for Thunder.
Yeah, I thought this one was really fascinating. It looks to me like Karen Gregg basically at halftime went to let me try my plan B and my plan C with my team. But and that's not to discredit actually what Panthers did, but there was so much disconnection in that third quarter. And we should say Panthers reduced a 14-goal deficit, most of it in the 10-minute period, not even using the super shot to get it done. I think that was really impressive. But I kind of wrote out in my notes how that every time Thunder lost the ball, and so much of it was like a bad pass to particularly in Thunder's attack, trying to find the person that they were throwing to, and at that time it was I think it was Rayner, Metcalf, Fawns, Pearson, and then Cardwell comes on, and then down the other end, Smith has to come back on, Josie Huckle goes off, Thunder then have to rearrange everything because it's the scoreline goes down so much. But so there was a lot of disconnection between the Thunder front end that, but the credit really goes to Panthers in the way they were able to punish Thunder for that. And I thought Tiana Maturo at goal shooter with Kira Rothwell at goal attack was inspired. And Maturo was really holding Josie Huckle off her so well. It was a real masterclass, actually, in how to hold your space. It was giving Kat Tuiviti back in the day. And she found her super shot range. And that was, again, really a bit of a revelation for Panthers. It's kind of giving, this is why we signed this player, because she can do that. And Betsy Creek probably had a game she wasn't as effective. She's probably her least effective game for a very long time. She was kind of lost between, do I body up and do I move? And that didn't really seem to flow. So when Betsy came back on in the fourth quarter, I wasn't totally convinced by that change. I think it was pulled because Nick Smith came on and had immediate impact with her arms. And she was the player of the match for that game, and she had massive impact in it on the stat sheet for sure. But yeah, there's a lot, and I don't think Thunder were the only team really, or are not the only top team at the moment, figuring out combinations, because I think Lightning look like they're doing that with Berry Neal, even when Berry Neal doesn't feel like they need her, and she doesn't always come on in the best way. Lightning really mostly hold on to her to figure it out, and I think that's kind of future building. But just for Nick Smith, for the record, she came away with 3 rebounds, 5 deflections, 2 intercepts, and 7 gains. So that was pretty impressive from her. What did you make for that one, Paul?
Well, you stole my Nick Smith line. That's how I was going to come in.
Sorry.
That's quite all right. It's quite all right. Yeah, I thought it was really good to see her back, obviously. And that sort of Thunder squad, as we've said, looks super strong. Third quarter was a real surprise to me. I wasn't watching the game in real time. I was out and about, so I watched it later on Saturday evening. And I really wasn't expecting that third quarter, like given what I'd seen. I think you've explained it really well, like going out and kind of looking at your combinations. But I never like to use the word, like a great old colleague of mine and a man I still call a friend, Rod Studd, the darts commentator. he hates the use of the word momentum, but netball is a sport that does kind of swing. Like there are real momentum flows, and not just due to the super shot. And you're right to point out that actually the hard work for Panthers was done a little bit before that. I do think there's still a bit of a concern in the lack of experience in their team, and I think the fact that with Tiana in the shooting position and Kira in goal attack, that really gave them something significant at the attack end. And Tiana using her body against like one of the most experienced goalkeepers, if not the most experienced goalkeepers in the league, in Josie, who I think is always super commanding when she plays. And I thought that was as rattled as I'd seen kind of Josie look from a playing perspective in a really long time. So I thought that was positive for Panthers. The squad depth now for Thunder is super encouraging. And as much as we point out the third, we should also point out the fourth, where they came storming back to do their bit and kind of have a pretty comfortable win in the end, and 3 well-earned points. The question I wanted to ask you, Chloe, is do Panthers have a little bit of a Charlie Fiddler problem coming as well? We've pointed it out a couple of times. There's a lot to like about her game, but there's a lot that looks a little bit ragged at times as well.
It's it's just the attention, the penalty. Not in this game actually, because in this game actually she had 12 penalties, but she was warned, so she had play advanced, and that was actually something. The same for Neve Cooper. Umpires sort of give that, one more and you're off. But she was, I think, allowed to get away with a couple more, so I was a bit confused by that one. The same with Neve Cooper in the Pulse game, but it does feel like the physicality could be something that might get pulled up. I mean, I'm playing in hypothetical, but certainly her on Cardwell was pretty spicy, and you could see Cardwell. Maybe I saw people saying that she's flopping. I don't think she was flopping.
No,
I think she was trying to emphasize perhaps the nature of the contact on her, and sometimes you do have to maybe exaggerate, but there were a couple of times she was on the floor. So yeah, it's not a problem yet, because it hasn't resulted in a suspension. But we went from 19 penalties to 24 penalties in previous games to then being warned. I just think it's probably something you would hope that Sonia might sort of say, hey, like, let's get some attention away from you. Like, this is, you don't want to have that reputation, really, coming, and an umpire, I'm sure, would say to me, we forget everything, we don't have that, but the players in the league are going to pick up on that. You're very physical, so they're going to be ready for it, and maybe they'll also be emphasizing the contact that's coming. But I look at it, and I should say on the stat sheet, where did she end up, Paul? With 10 gains.
Yep.
So an impressive innings, but at what cost? I think is the question, right?
So yeah, that was my point, because there was a lot of, again, there was quite a lot of positive in there, and I've been quite impressed by the way she come into a different league and played her part. But it's almost, there comes a point where maybe your reputation starts to precede you a little bit, and I just wonder if maybe at times she's a little bit too physical for her own good. But I liked that element of the game, and I thought her battle with El Cardwell was fascinating. Really, like really both trying to get one up on the other in different ways. And we've obviously talked this season about maybe gamesmanship or ways to kind of get ahead. Like, that's just sport. Since the day dot, you'll always try and find an advantage, and perhaps there are times where Charlie might need to get used to the players that she's playing against, right? And she'll start to understand, right, I can't do that against that person, but I could do it against that person, and different things. So yeah, the evolution of Panthers is something we keep saying that we're looking forward to moving. And I thought there was, after a concerning first half, I thought there were some pieces that they can take forward, not least the switch of Matura to goal shooter. I think that's probably a big thing for them.
Yeah, and Keris Finn did just so well. slotted into goal defence, which we don't really see her at normally as a goalkeeper for Scotland. But yeah,
So
that was really cool.
Before maybe half time, because we've got 2 more games to go. On that subject, I took in the next gen game between Forest and Pulse on Saturday morning, and Phoebe Maslin was playing centre for Pulse. So I pointed out at the start of the year, I thought that was a really smart acquisition. Same way Keris Finn at Mavericks is a really good acquisition. And I didn't have a chance to do this, partly because I have a day job to do as well, and I'm a nerd. But I wondered if, like, looking back to all the next gen squads, picking like an all-star next gen team that you'd like to pick off, because Keris Finn would be in it, Phoebe Maslin would be in it, and then I just didn't have a chance to kind of go around looking at the rest of the squads. But it is something that I find interesting. And we spoke about it last year, a concept that is maybe slightly weird, that you could just pick off an opponent's squad player. That's for want of a better description. But yeah, I just was really impressed by Phoebe, and obviously Keris has stepped up last year and has now done the same again this year.
Shannon Malik?
Shannon
Maybe?
Malik, yeah, it's good. Yeah,
Yeah.
good. There's our 3, 1 from each area of the court. Perfect. Yeah, we're done. But yeah,
So on to the next one.
On to the next one. Yeah. That was a little half-time interval. This was the game I watched this morning, actually, on the way into work. Mavericks against Lightning. It was at Arena Sport Essex. Mavericks on the road. Really good crowd in attendance as well, but Lightning doing Lightning things, 66-58, but probably tested, if we, the Pulse comeback aside, probably tested as much as they've been over the course of this season, right?
Definitely. I actually really I was very impressed with Mavericks in this game. Because it was 15 all, 15-13, 15 all, and then 21-15. I actually just think Mavericks sort of just dropped slightly across in different areas. It wasn't specifically a moment or a player.
I totally agree, yeah.
And you can't afford to do that against Loughborough Lightning. Obviously, they're there to punish, and I think everyone sort of ran out of puff. Like, I think Mavericks' defense end just sort of ran slightly out of steam, but they had been really brilliant. Credit to them. I do think Razia Kwashi's footwork is just some of the best in this league for a goalkeeper, and she, I think, is a bit of a thorn in Samantha Waller-Joseph's side for that, because she's really good at coming round with her feet around the body. If Jada Pekova is really good in the air, and we'll talk about that, I think Razia Kwashi is really good at coming round. And actually Lightning, and we did say this, didn't we, that Mavericks could go toe to toe with Lightning on the super shot, and they really did. But it was just that clinical piece that was missing from Mavericks, really, at that kind of just towards the end of the third frame, and then heading into Q4, it just didn't feel like quite that they were there. The structures were maybe falling a little bit, the discipline maybe a little bit also edging away. But Lightning, getting the job done, and I guess I spoke about it a little bit, but I am really impressed with the way they're injecting Berry Neal and committing to injecting Berry Neal, because she has for the last couple of games struggled with her entry, but then she kind of flows into it, and Vic Burgess obviously, I think, is future planning in the way that it looked to me like Karen Gregg was as well. Like, you need to get this 10 in shape, not just a 7, and they can. And actually that was a really good game probably for Berry to feel Jamie Golub, to feel Gemma Donoghue and Razia Kwashi. What do you make of it when you watch it this morning?
Yeah, I thought it was a really good contest. There wasn't a huge amount in it. I thought Mavs gave Lightning more problems than most teams that they've been up against so far this season, as I mentioned kind of in the intro. I think running out of puff is quite a good way to say it, and I wonder if that sort of sums up what we expect from Lightning. They are just that relentless nature, and their change-up was really good, but they don't let up, for want of a better description. Like, what you're going to get, and almost always, and maybe this is true of probably the top teams in the country, that you're going to have to be at it for 4 full quarters, and maybe this Mavs team isn't quite at the level that they need to be for 4 quarters, but definitely for 3 and a little bit, they show that they maybe have got a little bit more about them, certainly as an attacking force, than we gave them credit for a little bit in the preview. And I think, rightly we said that there were questions for them to answer, and we thought that their defensive end would get better and better. And I think that's what we saw in that game. And in the end, Lightning were just able to sort of change it that little bit, and Berry stepped up, where she hasn't quite so far this season. And that's because they have lent into Sammy and Ella so much, right? We spoke last week about the super shot shooting. And whilst Berry can shoot the super shot, she actually gives you a little bit more from a playmaking point of view and in her speed around the court. She's a very different option. And I think that was probably just enough to give Mavericks something different to think about. Having dealt with certain things for the majority of the game, I felt that that's probably where Lightning just got themselves over the line. And in the end, Mavs are pretty unlucky not to claim a bonus point in it as well. And I will make no qualms about saying about the bonus point on a regular basis, because I think we will see that it's going to be important, especially if these guys maybe in the battle between fourth, fifth, and sixth nick points off each other or take points off the sort of three big hitters. But I think a real super positive experience for Mavericks.
Yeah, I think your point about the bonus point is not laboured. I think I think they will be a bit gutted that they didn't walk away with that. And just on Ella Clark, another game at 100%. I mean, 3 super shots, 9 goals.
At this stage, it's like she's a basketball shooter, obviously. Right. So in theory, she shouldn't miss. But there's no backboard. so it's different. And she is remarkable. And we spoke about Tamsin and Tracy's pod earlier. I just thought it was interesting that Tracy threw out Ella Clark as a bit of a wild card suggestion. If there was a super shot in the Commonwealth game, like that would absolutely, I think it would be a no-brainer. I often make the argument when we talk about football squads and different things like that. So if you're in a World Cup semi-final and you're losing 1-0 and you look down your bench, you don't want to see 4 goalkeepers and 6 defenders. You'd rather have more attacking options. So I don't think Ella Clark should be in the Comm game squad. However, if there is a super shot Commonwealth Games or World Cup coming around the corner, then I think she's a shoo-in, because it's pretty frightening the level she's shooting at the moment.
Definitely. And Ella Clark has been in and around the Roses.
Yeah, she has. Yeah.
So it did make me smile when Tracy did mention that. And actually, like, this was not Samantha Wallace-Joseph's most accurate super shooting. No. Yeah. She missed 5. She got 7. So it actually brought her average down a little. She shot the 1 point at 94% and then super shot at 58%. But yeah, I actually also wanted to shout out, we did, when we previewed this, we spoke about the wing attacks, and it was the game was so defensive, so structured the first half particularly, and you could see the attention that both Susie and Hannah Joseph were getting, Susie Liversidge and Hannah Joseph. But Hannah Joseph, I thought, was really, really great. 34 feeds. She got a gain. I could see when she picked off that ball, I just thought that's a nice little win. 20 centre pass receives, the most out of anybody. So she was still managing to get that first phase. I think really Mavericks were trying to catch her on the second. And then Susie Liversidge, 21 centre pass receives and 28 feeds, and no errors. So and the same for Hannah Joseph had 2 errors, but Susie had none. So they are both such engines for their teams for sure.
Hannah's having a really terrific season, and we did think whether the arrival of Jess Shaw would kind of put her under pressure a little bit, and we might see Jess further up the court in due course. But Hannah Joseph is just always maybe like lightning, like just an embodiment of that relentless nature and that ability to just keep going and keep going and keep going. Helps when you got Sammy and Ella in the circle, though, doesn't it? Right, like that helps an awful lot.
Yeah, I mean, they recruited Samantha Wallace-Joseph to give the mid-court, who they have not really changed. And you've picked up a mid-court in Jess Shaw that's used to feeding also long and tall. She was feeding Ziggy Berger for a couple of seasons. So it's all very deliberate. It's very deliberate to keep the engine and the machine all ticking along, isn't it? The lightning force, as it were. So yeah, no, a really good game, and props to Mavericks for pushing what we were saying. Lightning are absolutely dominant, so it gave them a good tickle.
1 game to go.
Yeah, the big one.
what a game this was. Like, it was crazy and dramatic at every level, which I think in the first instance, before we get into the nuances of it, this is what we want to see, right? Like, we want to see drama. I'm going to say chaos, because there was an awful lot of chaos to my mind. Forest no longer unbeaten. Pulse, as they have done really this season, somehow finding a way to win. And they did it after extra time, 73-63. The game, I don't quite know where to start with it, Chloe. So I'll throw it over to you from a starting point. There's one very, very obvious talking point, and that was that Pulse couldn't find a super shot for love nor money for 60 minutes and then couldn't miss, right? Sometimes sport will blow your mind, right? And I'm not just talking about watching Victor Wembanyama highlights every morning at the moment. I can't explain how that happened. It beggars belief a little bit.
Yeah. It was a really fascinating game. And you were obviously there at the Copper Box, so you felt it. And I do think that also colours the way you're going to talk about it in a really great way, but it would definitely will. I think that Forest did a really good job of setting up Jada Pekova to give Liv Sheen a complete headache. So I was struck by it in the first quarter. I am not picky bits, everybody. Unfortunately, I didn't have time. But one of the things that if you go back and watch that first quarter, even the second, to be honest, until Gracie Smith comes on, you can see Pulse attacking down one channel, and it was the if you're watching the broadcast, it's the one furthest away, and then they were effectively holding Pulse out to that side. So the ball was coming in from the pocket or on the corner. Big, long and loopy, and credit to Jada Pekova because, you know, I think we spoke about her, whether she should be in England last year, and I said no. But she has a very specific skill set that is getting better and better, which is taking ball up in the air and challenging, and she has this ability to float, and it really bothered Liv Sheen. And Liz Scholes as well, some of the ball that was being sprayed. I think 14 of the Pulse's attacking movements down that if they entered that third channel, I counted it, there were 14. 7 of them ended in some kind of disruption on attack. And so that kind of built, not because actually when the 1 point game started, we got out to 11-6, didn't we? And I thought, oh, okay, this is only going in one direction. And then we finished the super shot period in 12-15, and that was partly because of what you're going to talk about, the super shot missing, but also because that pressure was being built. It was that feed going into the circle was getting more and more awkward. And then Pekova also was unbelievable on the rebound, so good and so important. It really kept Forest in the game. Well, we were talking about attacking rebounds earlier, but the defensive rebounds that Jada and Tash Pavlin a bit, but particularly Pekova were able to get, it kept Forest in front for this game. And then really, I think the other thing I wanted to point out from a Forest perspective before we talk about Pulse's shooting is Dixon really is being missed because Grierson, I don't think, is a 60-minute wing attack. And there were just a couple of where she coughed the ball up a couple of times was just like not running onto it. And it was like, you can't afford to not run into a ball as a wing attack, particularly with Zara Everett, who had a great game, fantastic game, a really, truly brilliant game. I'd be interested to know if you got any intel on her injury, because it looked like a calf, it pinged. But I think there's something to that for Forest. And obviously the way that they lost that lead were devastating. And Chelsea Pittman was on comms saying that Neve Cooper put her hand up and said, sorry, like that was on me and I won't do it again. So immediately was accountable for it. And I think psychologically, Forest were deflated in that extra time. And I don't want to take any credit away from the Pulse shooting, but the defence just sort of seemed to... Hannah Layton had possibly the toughest gig of the game to come on at centre. She intercepted one ball, threw it away. Second centre pass, she gave straight in the hands of Gracie Smith. And I think that then possibly gave Pulse at least a 3-goal or 4-goal lead into extra time. And I think at that point, as Nottingham Forest, you know that this is a beast. You've just poked and maybe it's game over for you. But and it was as it ended up being. But perhaps if I just to finish on Forest before I hand over to you, this is, I think, something they'll be delighted with, probably not on the day or the day after, or maybe not until a week after, but they did that to London Pulse with a team with two babies, so Annie Williams and Lily Smith, and with Rhea Dixon out, and did not inject an A Retief at any point. And I think an A Retief could be very helpful the next time they match up. So clearly this is a great contest, these two teams. We thought it would be. I thought Pulse would win. I didn't expect extra time. Let me pass it over to you.
Yeah, I don't think anyone expected extra time. Where I was sat, there were a lot of people going, "What happens now?" I was like, crack on, ladies." And yeah, I watched the game back, actually. I watched it back on Monday evening because I thought, obviously, when you're in a game like that, and I felt this actually last year when I did the Lightning semi-final, which was, a real sort of dramatic game. It's always good to watch them back. And I think Forest played really well. We'll hear from Sam in a moment. I spoke to her afterwards. She gave Forest an immense amount of credit for how difficult they made it for Pulse, who had to kind of try and keep trying to find a different way. And as you'll hear from Sam, she just thinks in the end, it took them a long time to wear Forest down. And I think in that regard, I was potentially quite surprised that we didn't see either Hannah Layton or Anya Retief earlier, partly because I felt like Forest had done such a good job of getting themselves in front, which you've illustrated. But then it just felt like Pulse tweaked a couple of things to get themselves back in it. And you could sort of feel the game closing up. But every time Pulse got to within striking distance, the buzzer went. It went to super shot time. Rolene was brilliant, as she usually is down one end. And both Liv Sheen and Kamachela Maseko struggled. Like, there's no other way to say this. In the end, Sophie Kelly came on and absolutely crucially nailed one, like in the last sort of minute or so, that kind of got Pulse back to within one. And then Liv took the one that took the game into extra time. And then, I think that sapped the life out of Forest, and somehow Sophie Kelly found the composure to make 7 super shots, like having missed so many, which was just totally bizarre. And I don't think you can account for an anomaly like that. But what I do think you can account for is the really impressive job Forest did as a defensive unit. I was lucky enough to be pretty close to the court. I thought Jada Pekova did such a brilliant job. She's so imposing without like being immediately imposing. Her lean is great. Her arms are high, and she could create a lack of space for those in front of her, whether it's skulls, as you pointed out, or whether it's the shooters who have to go at a slightly different angle. But I thought her partnership with Tash Pavlin, Pavlova, as I believe Nia Jones has christened it, which is excellent. I have hands up in this instance. That the way they work together, there's elements of like Fumi and Hallie there. When you see it close up, they talk each other through the game. They defended quite high as well, which I think was a deliberate ploy, because Liv is clearly she's a tall shooter, and you put her in that area, she can obviously come all the way out of the circle. She can control things there. But I felt there was a very deliberate game plan to keep Pulse a little bit higher than they would like. And ultimately, I do think that's probably how they got themselves in front. Pulse were in front early, but Forest won the first quarter's super shot period 9-1. And that was pretty symbolic of what was to shake out. And I don't want to make it all about the super shot, but part of my question to Sam was how do you give the players, how do you get them out of their own heads in that regard? Because it clearly becomes a mental thing. And in amongst other things, here's what she had to say.
Sam, this venue's seen a lot of dramatic moments back to the Olympics, but I'm not sure anyone's seen anything quite as dramatic as that. How are you?
I'm exhausted. What a game. Forest played really well. I felt we were drawn into a little bit playing at their tempo and pace, and we like to play with slightly more energy. and that sort of sapped the life out of us a little bit. But I thought what was good, I think we just improved through the game, and the resilience of the shooters to come through really difficult patches, personally, to then just be outstanding when it mattered is a really good thing. Obviously, you don't want them missing shots, but the way they responded to that under pressure was just outstanding.
What do you say to players in that sort of situation? Because it was obviously very tough, and you could see they were kind of thinking about it.
Yeah, well, that's what we were talking about as a coaching group at half time. Like, what do you say? You know, you're trying to build them up, or do you give them a reality check on this is their job? And it was a bit of both. But we just talked about whether it was a miss because of pressure applied by Forest or whether it was us, and we felt it was us, and so we knew we could rectify that. And so got to give massive credit, in front of 3,000 people, and they came out and practiced again, got their groove, and then shot brilliantly in the extra time.
And what you mentioned sort of Forest played quite well. What did you think they did quite well to sort of hinder you a little bit?
I think they slowed us down.
Yeah. So
we like to play at speed. We get a good feeling of playing at pace, rushing around, and they sort of slowed the game down. But I thought they were just sort of, everyone was doing their own job pretty well, I thought, for Forest. So Chelsea had obviously asked them to really take responsibility for their own player, and they did. And we know they've got a good shooting option with Rolene in there. So I thought I could see that they were doing what Chelsea asked them to deliver. But I felt that we wanted to be more clinical in the game, and we weren't. But the good news is that we rode that trouble and came out the other side with very convincing performance in extra time.
That's what I was going to say. For everything that went before, to almost detach yourself from that and play the final 10 minutes, if you like, as a one-off game was quite impressive.
Yeah, really impressive. And Hallie and Fumi picked up critical wins at the back. I mean, everyone. The defence is always good at Pulse, as we know. But I thought, Gracie got good tips, Zara got good tips. So everybody was on defence, and I felt that was the first time Forest looked like they'd run out of ideas, was in extra time, and it had taken us that long to sort of wear them down, but we did. So I think really, I mean, we don't want games like this, the fans do obviously, but I've got to be pleased with how we just stepped it up in extra time.
So that was Sam afterwards. I suppose a question for you, Chloe, here is, we've praised Forest, who I think did really, really well. I think Pulse did a great job of overcoming some tough issues and turning the game their way slowly but surely. But there hasn't yet been a full-on 4 quarters from Pulse. I think probably their first 3 against Thunder might be the best that we've seen from them. The back end of this game was better. The Lightning game, the final quarter was strong. But they do seem to be struggling, and this is the champions, so their standards are way higher than everybody. Not everybody, but than maybe some of the lesser teams in the league. What is it that they're not quite doing right this year? Because they don't quite seem fluid, and that's kind of taking account they have found a way to win 3 of the 4 games.
Yeah, well, because I think on our preview last time, I sort of said that they'd not won a final quarter.
No, they haven't. No.
And I said to you at the time that for the defending champions, that's a bit of a red flag, because you got to close out games. Like, this is that. And that's what they were doing last season. They were really clinical, and it felt like they were missing their edge. And it does feel that I think we said the goal attack bib would be still a bit of an issue for them. And I think shooting aside, I think there's obviously something, the management of that still needs to be ironed out. I don't think they have a 10 in the way that Thunder and Lightning have a 10, and Sam Bird perhaps hasn't had the opportunity to run out a 10 yet, like she would have liked, like the other 2 are trying to do. But I think it's going to have to be really important from them, and I think maybe they're going to need to trust, Darcy Everett a little bit more. They're going to need to, because they are flipping Tyler and Gracie around quite a lot. And I don't know if it's just that they're playing the same way that they have been playing. I haven't seen anything new from them. Fumi Vidoju is quiet by her standards, we should say. She's not topping the boards as we might expect. She's I think I was saying this to you on Monday, on the intercept front and things like that. She's sort of down the list, and it's and I think what's great for them, for their season prospects, is that they are still getting points, they're winning, they're coming away with things. So, will we look back on this in round 8 and round 12 and be like, it was just a slow start? Or is it actually a symptom of a team that hasn't really evolved, or it isn't being pushed to evolve in the right kind of way? They're not they were undone by Lightning by their own box method. That to me is really striking, because surely you train against this, surely you know this, surely you can identify this. So and if there is a shooting problem, that's going to be, I'm thinking about London Mavericks coming up against London Pulse, thinking, all right then, like, if Forest have done that to you, if Dragons only lost you by 1, and you played Thunder in your opening game, big at home, first statement, Thunder weren't really hitting their straps yet, there's something for us in this, right? And we just pushed Lightning all the way. So I think it's exciting for the rest of the league if it's not going to be like it was last year, which is sort of like this big rolling sort of a machine. But there's definitely, I think Paul's are going to have to go away and have a real think about. I think that team I trust as a culture, and the personalities in it and the way they want to win and the way they want to get through games, I trust. I just wonder if like their game plan needs a bit more to it. I think if I can answer your question that way, what do you reckon?
Yeah, that's a fair point. I think I've often said that when we questioned Lightning a little bit about this last year, didn't we? And they made the grand final. It's like the start of last season for Lightning was really sticky, wasn't it? Like they weren't convincing in a lot of ways, and it was almost like, what are this team going to do to take themselves forward? And there they were in the grand final at the end of the season, the way Lightning have been sort of as a persistent force. So I do wonder at the evolution of Pulse. I thought Maseko, forget the shooting shortcomings, I thought Pulse's game turned when she became a little bit more of a playmaker rather than a circle player, and it did seem to confuse Pavlin and Pekova just a little bit more. So I wonder if we might see that a little bit more. Maybe in many ways that's kind of how Nicole Breet played last year, almost as a playmaker rather than a shooter, but someone who can shoot. I think they'll rise to the challenge. I think that's what's good about teams like Thunder, teams like Lightning. And I think over the last few years, we can put Pulse in that bracket, that they've got a mentality that finds a way to win games. And they've probably won them in 3 different ways this season. And it's now, what do we see from them in terms of evolution? Because I think you're right. I think the good teams and the really great teams find different ways to play. And I think as we go into sort of this middle block of the season, you probably want to see that evolving, then ready for that final part of the season, where we said in the season preview we would expect Pulse, Lightning and Thunder to be in the dance at the end of the year. And the jostling beforehand is about learning. You pointed it out, sort of about Berry Neal and about sort of Thunder's changes this time. And maybe Pulse haven't quite been in a game yet that has allowed them to do that, because it's been closer than perhaps they would like. So I think a really kind of inquisitive period arrives for Pulse now. Like, what more do you do? What extra pieces to the puzzle do you put in play? Because there's also, nearly 2 years of this team on tape, right? Like, that's just common nature of any sport. When you see a team do something for a long period of time, there's more of it to work out and more ways to find a way around it. We see it a lot I've mentioned the NFL a few times, and NBA. It's like, okay, offense or defense is kind of getting the upper hand. But that's 2 years of offense. And how does the defense get on top? Well, by watching that 2 years of offense. So I do wonder how Pulse rise to the challenge that other teams are rising to with them now. That's what
I think the second half of the season is going to be really interesting for them. If it isn't already interesting by the end of this first half. I think, like I said, Forest with Dixon back and potentially with the injection of an Retief, I think it could be a different game.
Yeah, that was surprising. I genuinely think it's surprising it was to see Retief and Leighton. I do think that, because to your point, I think there was an element of fatigue that was coming into Forest, and I think Pulse had turned the game, even if it was still really, really close. And I was quite surprised that Forest didn't inject a change up. Shout out for Lily Smith as well, who obviously came on and did a really good job.
Indeed. I'm just having a look at the stat lines. Anybody that... Yeah, I mean, I just think this is just remarkable when you look in the Super Shot percentage column and it says 0-0 for China Maseko. It's just crazy.
It was
and then
really
Kelly
weird.
with the POM performance with an overall 57%. But as you said so well, it was all at the right time, wasn't it? So
yeah, it's sport, right? Genuinely, it's sport, because it's so crazy that it could be so bad and then so good. It's like, what happened there? On we go though. We'll wrap up with a quick spin around the weekend. We obviously have the usual 4 games to spin through. We'll start in round 5 on Friday night. Pulse are away at Rhinos, which is in Sheffield. Obviously, we've pointed out the Rhinos have lost their last 3 after a win. Pulse 3 wins out of 4, but maybe a chance for Pulse to do something a little bit different and maybe to see what else they've got sort of to put out on the table this year.
Yeah, I think that's very much what that will be. It'll be a tough day in the office for Rhinos. I have no doubt, particularly that front end. I think they're going to get... I think they're not going to have so much fun against Adio, Fadoju, Everett, and maybe other Everett as well. If Darcy gets a spin around, and I think she should, I think this would be a great opportunity to have her on the court, and Smith as well, maybe. Because I think the other thing about Everett going down, my immediate feeling when she went down was, oh, Forest are going to win this, because I was thinking like, and Orr slipped into that wing defence bid, but could we see what Smith looks like at wing defence and or at centre, and maybe just play around a little bit with those rotations? Certainly for Pulse, I think it could be worth exploring. But I would love to see Maseko and Visser as a matchup to watch. That could be really good fun. A lot of South Africans have come up against each other already in this league. Obviously, Rolene was there with Kamachelo on the weekend. So yeah. What about you? Is there any matchups here that you're looking at?
Yeah, I want to say the mid-court area, because I do wonder how Rhinos line up there. Bella Bayliss is someone we spoke about getting more court time, and she'd have probably been disappointed not to start last weekend. We don't know if there was maybe a knock in there or something, but I do think if Rhinos would have any chance, changing as little as possible is important. So getting Bella Bayliss back into the mid-court, Cassie dropping back to wing defence, Sam Marie, if she's fit, at goal defence, and then Yomi Wilson, who I think is really super encouraging. She looked bright when we saw her in part for Thunder. And I think that limits the amount of changes you're having to make in a team. And I think for Rhinos, limiting the amount of kind of changes you need to make is going to be important. So how they can potentially cause Pulse problems is something I'm keen to see. But I think ultimately Pulse come away from this with a real sort of morale boosting kind of return to maybe significant winning ways, if that's not too harsh a way to say it. Do you know what I mean? Like I think Pulse will see this as a game that they can be, or would like to be, consistent for 4 quarters in.
Yeah, I agree. For sure. And that's on Friday, right?
That is Friday night. Yeah, Friday night, Sky Sports in Sheffield. 3 games Saturday, so strap yourself into your Saturday chair for this one. 6th place Dragons against 5th place Mavericks at House of Sport. Dragons obviously with the first win under their belt, but Mavericks, who've lost 3 of their 4 games, I think will genuinely feel there's progress for them.
Yep, definitely. I mean, you can't look at that Lightning performance and not see positives in it for Mavericks. I think this is a sneaky big game, this one, actually.
I do, yeah.
Yeah, I'm going to look forward to this one. I think Dragons will recognise that as well. They'll have watched that performance. I think they'll be looking at that front end, and Middleton will be definitely looking to get into Inga's head as early as possible. I think I foresee that matchup being quite a spicy one. And then down the other end, Kwashi on row could be really... It could force Dragons to really address that shooting end and really let's see if someone can shut down, obviously if Golob or Donahue can shut down Neve McCall, because we haven't really seen a complete total shutdown of McCall. Well, I guess we have a little bit, but is such an obvious target for Mavericks to go for and for Tamsin to pick at.
I'm with you there. I think Raz's, and you mentioned it before, I think Raz's footwork and her ability to move is probably going to force the Dragons' hand early. And unlike previous seasons, I think Dragons are now in a position where, okay, we can change because we've got this as an option now. And if it means Neve McCall goes to shooter and perhaps matches up against Raz, and we see Philippa Yarrington on maybe earlier than we have done so far this season, maybe even if we see it as a starting lineup, right? Like who knows? There could be that curveball in there. But I think that's probably going to be key to the game. I don't think there's going to be much in it. I think two aggressive defenses who've been impressive in the main so far this season will fancy their chances of winning an awful lot of ball. So it's how do the two shooting circles, which we probably said at the start of the season, how do they solve their conundrums? I've got this down. Next game we're about to talk about is probably the headline grabbing one, but Dragons versus Mavericks for me is the game of the weekend, because I do think they both now will really start to think, let's put a run together. Can we put a run together, and can we put ourselves in contention for a top 4 place? And these are the games where that bonus point that I keep speaking about, or the 3 points you take off your rivals, these become super big and super important the more we go through the season. So to get 3 on the board in a game like this now, I think it makes it pretty big.
Yeah, definitely. And then you're going to have to almost... Depends how you're going to approach this one, Paul, because do you watch this one live and miss the start of the next one? Or I don't know, it's going to a lot of choices for us weirdos that watch all of this all at once.
So here's where I come down on this. I think your casual netball fan settles in for Thunder versus Forest. I think your hipster, me and you, settle in for Mavericks versus Dragons and then come back to Thunder Forest later.
Oh dear, I don't think anyone's used hipster in about 3 years, Paul.
Hipster netball, definitely. Which is the one that not everyone's going to be watching. That's what I'm going to do.
Okay. So
we should probably assign these games when they double up a little bit for a first watch, right? Like you watch one and I'll watch the other one. But we do our homework. Yeah, we do our homework. We both watch all of them where we can.
Sometimes 3 times, Paul. I've watched the games 3 times.
I've not done 3. I have done 2. I have watched 2. So we sort of set it up. 2nd place Thunder against 3rd place Forest. Bellevue in Manchester, 5:00 Saturday night. I'm actually in Manchester for a netball tournament at the weekend, and I'm a little bit gutted that we're not finished till about 5:30, because I would have tried to go and watch this game. On the face of it, both teams 3 wins out of 3. Thunder have won their last 3. Forest have lost after winning their first 3. They'll both fancy it in different ways, won't they?
Yeah, definitely. I think in light of that 3rd quarter performance, I'm sure Karen Gregg will be asking her team for full quarters against Forest and really make that statement clear that this is this is a tricky team. Like Forest is, there is potential. There's Pekova and Pavlin have been really disruptive, and the Thunder front end has its weaknesses. Particularly, I think that there are combinations of it that lend themselves to Forest's defense. So, if we see Rayner and Metcalf again, I could just foresee Pavlin running around picking stuff off. So it'd be interesting to see how that goes. I do think, though, that Cardwell and Fawns are players that Pekova and Pavlin haven't really come up against it, because Cardwell's been out for 2 years and Fawns is obviously in. So that's definitely a new challenge for them as combinations, whereas, they'll have been familiar with Liv Cheen and Sophie Kelly, particularly because they're all at Bath together once upon a time, right? So, but then, down the other end is Rolene and she's such a important part of how Forest have been getting their wins. Obviously, the weak spot for Thunder to capitalize on is that goal attack, that with Williams and Smith if Dixon is not back in, and we haven't really heard anything about Dixon's sort of timeline. So I think I'm going to assume she's not back in, let's say, because I would imagine we'd hear if she was by this point. And that to me maybe then just opens the door for Thunder to kind of get away with this one. But I don't think it will be easy.
No, I don't think it'd be easy at all. And I do think, having sort of questioned why we maybe didn't see any more of Retief and Leighton, whether we see them, whether they maybe match up a little bit better in this instance. I think Cooper, Christian, and Grierson, it felt like that was a deliberate approach to kind of almost try and blow Pulse out of the water. I wonder if they try and do things a little bit differently here, not necessarily from the start, but in terms of an earlier or a more significant change up. Obviously, the trajectory of the game might change that plan, but Forest's depth is pretty good, and I do think how they kind of respond to the challenges that a game like this would present is probably the next step in their evolution. Thunder, though, are finding a groove that third quarter aside. I think I favour Thunder here. I wouldn't be surprised to see Forest run them close and maybe take something from the game in the end, because I think Forest's evolution is strong, as gutting as the defeat, an extra time defeat, will be to Pulse last time out.
Yeah, I think also Taylor McKevitt will be looking at Bree Grierson thinking, can I run you ragged? I'm sure that'll be going on, that sort of thinking.
One game left to go then. First place Lightning against 8th place Panthers, a Lightning machine that seems to be really purring, and a Panthers team that might have just found something, but this is probably as tough a test as there is in the league at the moment, given the groove the Lightning have hit early. It's in Loughborough as well. 6:30 on Saturday evening is the BBC's game. Panthers, not only the only winless team, but also the only team without any points whatsoever. Do you give them a chance here at all, Chloe?
Got nothing to lose, right? Yeah, of course. Like, you never know who. I mean, no, I don't mean like they're gonna win, but I think they'll be competitive, maybe for the first quarter, maybe the first half. It depends again how Lightning wanna how clinical they are with the super shot, how early on in the game. And the thing I've been impressed with Lightning is, I mean, they've been rotating really their 9, not so much the 10, but the 9. So it's not even like they kind of test out combinations. They have been rotating everybody. So we still don't know about Beth Durant, if she's in or not. But God, I don't know. It's hard. It's going to be really tough. It's going to be. Can we build on the performance? Can we take that third quarter performance and try and find what was successful about it and replicate it? Because I do think like Izzy K has had immense impact. I think Tiana Matura at goal shooter was really great. So there, and Keris Finn was inspired. Fiddler and Samantha Walsh-Joseph. Whoa, it's going to be something. Can somebody get in the head of Ella Clark? There are lots of little questions. I think overall, the outcome is definitely swinging really hard into one direction. But I don't know. What about you? What are you thinking?
Yeah, I think, again, it's quite hard. I think we said this before last week's game. I think there is a need to sort of almost play these games that you kind of, are going to be really tough from the outset. And what are your kind of learning points? Where do you want to take something from? And if Panthers can take something out of that third quarter against Thunder and then translate it to maybe a half or 3 quarters or 4 quarters in this game and kind of continue to put those building blocks in place. We've spoken about the nature of their young squad, but we also saw the value of an experienced attack end, right, with Tiana and with Kira Rothwell. Like, there are options in this Panthers squad to kind of not overburden the youngsters as much as we kind of want to see them grow. I continue to bang that drum this season because I think their squad does give them the opportunity to do that. Whether they can take enough out of the Lightning the third quarter last time out to give Lightning enough of a headache, I think remains to be seen. And again, when they're shooting the super shot the way they are, it's hard not to see even a close contest just pulling away. That's just the nature of what Lightning are able to do at the moment. Maybe we might see a little bit more Berry Neal in this game as far as Lightning are concerned. And maybe a bit of Selena Appleby-Prince, who I think they've injected at certain points this season. But again, we've made the point a few times so far today, that ability to sort of see what else you've got and see how you can put those combinations on court is probably an opportunity that Lightning will look to take out of this as well.
Definitely. I think you're right.
I think that brings us to an end, doesn't it? There's nothing at the end of my running order. So that's end of round 5 preview is kind of how we come to a conclusion there. Any kind of bits and pieces you want to draw to a close? But we've gone on for a bit here, Chloe.
Yeah, we have. No streaming issues, please.
I think that's a very fair sign-off.
Please. I'm looking at you, everybody. No. Yes, and definitely, I think our fantasy team, Paul.
Yes, we have an issue ourselves. I haven't just been banging the Hannah Layton drum over the last 20 minutes because she's in our team, but it's costing us. It's costing us at the moment, unfortunately, because we haven't had the luxury that some have had, including your husband, Chloe, who've been able to replace an injured player. We are just having to deal with a Hannah Layton not in the starting lineup at the moment, and that's we're still top of our own league. No, we're not actually. We're 4th in our own league, but we're top in the battle of the pods, and I think you and I have decided that's what we have to win this year. That's our focus, right?
That is our focus, yes. Unfortunately, my husband is doing really well, and he was one of those ones that was able to take out Jazz Brown and put in Jackie Newton. So I think maybe might still only get better. But anyway, that's by the by. Thank you, everybody, for this episode. It's been a good one, Paul.
It has. Enjoy your netball weekends, everybody.